The rain fell in sheets over the winding mountain road, the kind of relentless storm that turned the narrow pass outside the small Oregon town into a treacherous stretch of shadow and slick pavement. Liam Carter gripped the steering wheel tighter, squinting through the windshield as his old pickup's wipers struggled to keep up. He'd just finished his last delivery for the night lumber for a hardware store and was desperate to get home. His son Noah, only 4 years old, needed his heart medication by 9 p.m. sharp. Liam had already missed too many deadlines lately, too many unpaid bills piling on the kitchen counter. As the truck rounded a blind curve, Liam's headlights flashed across something that made his stomach drop. A car, twisted and crumpled against a tree, steam rising from its mangled hood. Without thinking, he slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded before jerking to a halt on the muddy shoulder. He threw open the door and ran, boots splashing through the mud. "Hello," he shouted over the roar of the rain. "Is anyone hurt?" The driver's side was smashed in. He rounded the vehicle and found the passenger door ajar, barely hanging on its hinges. Inside, slumped over the center console, was a woman, auburn hair clinging to her cheeks, streaked with blood from a shallow cut at her temple. Her chest rose and fell, but she was unconscious. Hey, can you hear me?" Liam leaned in, shaking her gently. Her skin was cold. No response. With adrenaline buzzing through his limbs, he reached under her arms and pulled her from the wreckage. She was light, limp, like a drowned bird. He staggered back to his truck with her in his arms, carefully placing her in the passenger seat and grabbing the emergency blanket from behind the seat. Just as he reached for his phone to call for help, the woman stirred, her head tilted slightly, lips parting in a hoarse whisper. "Sophie." Liam froze. That name. He turned to look at her, and for a moment, everything in the world seemed to hold its breath. She blinked up at him through the rain-streaked glass, dazed but alive, and Liam felt his heart drop into his stomach. It wasn't possible, it couldn't be. The curve of her jaw, the delicate arch of her eyebrows, her nosy on the faint dimple that appeared when her lips moved again. "Sophie," she whispered once more, eyes fluttering shut. Liam stared at her, unmoving. His breath caught in his throat, because the face he saw, it was the face of his wife. But his wife, Hannah, had died 2 years ago. And yet this woman, this stranger, she looked almost identical. Not exactly. Her hair was darker, her voice huskier, but the resemblance was undeniable. A shiver ran through him that had nothing to do with the cold. He sat there, soaked to the bone, staring at her while the storm raged on outside. His hands trembled as he finally picked up the phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I have a car accident victim. She's alive but unconscious. About 10 miles east of Millage, just off the main pass. Please send an ambulance." After hanging up, he looked at the woman again. "Sophie, who are you?" he thought. "And why do you have my wife's eyes?" Liam carried the woman gently from the truck to the small guest bed in the corner of his modest home. Rainwater dripped from her coat onto the wooden floor, but he barely noticed. His hands were shaking. She'd said her name was Sophie. Sophie. And yet her God, her face looked so much like Hannah's. It was like staring into a ghost that refused to fade. Noah stood by the kitchen doorway in his dinosaur pajamas, clutching his stuffed bear. His wide blue eyes locked on Sophie. "Mama," he whispered. Liam's heart cracked at the sound. He dropped to one knee beside Noah. "No, buddy," he said softly, brushing a curl from his son's forehead. "This is Sophie. She's just staying here for a little while." Noah blinked uncertainly, looking at Sophie again. She stirred slightly on the bed, her lashes fluttering. "Okay," Noah whispered, but his eyes lingered on her. By morning, Sophie was sitting at the table, her hair still damp, wearing one of Liam's old flannel shirts. She looked out the window as if trying to piece the world together. She had no ID, no phone, no memory of where she'd been going, just her first name in a haunted look that spoke of roads too long and burdens too heavy. "I can cook," she said quietly after a long silence. "To repay you for letting me stay. It's the least I can do." Liam hesitated. "You don't have to. I want to." She moved around his kitchen with quiet precision, opening cupboards like she already knew what was inside. Liam watched her chop onions with practiced ease, crack eggs into a bowl like she'd done it 1,000 times. The smell that soon filled the kitchen hit him like a punch to the gut. He knew that smell. Scrambled eggs, with chives, toast with a hint of garlic butter. It was Hannah's favorite breakfast, one she'd made every Sunday morning. Noah ran in, drawn by the scent. He climbed onto his chair and kicked his little legs under the table. Sophie placed a plate in front of him, smiling gently. "Eat up, sweetheart." Noah beamed. "Thank you, Mama." Sophie froze. Liam held his breath. Then she sat down beside the boy, her smile faltering but not disappearing. "You're welcome, Noah." Later that night, Noah had a nightmare. Liam rushed in to find the boy, sobbing, clutching his chest. Sophie was already there, kneeling beside the bed, wrapping Noah in her arms and whispering, "It's okay, baby. I'm here. I'm here. Don't go," Noah cried. "Please, Mama, don't go." Sophie looked up at Liam then, her eyes wide and wet. She rocked Noah gently, smoothing his hair, and whispered the same words again. "I'm here, I promise." Liam stood, frozen at the door, the past and present tangled around his throat. In the dim nightlight, Sophie's face looked like a memory he'd never truly let go of. He turned away before the tears came. The next morning, Sophie sat by the window again, Noah asleep in her lap. Her hand rested on the boy's back protectively, her face carrying the softness of someone who'd found something she never knew she needed. "I should leave soon," she said when Liam entered the room. "You can stay," he replied too quickly. Then, more carefully, "at least until we figure out where you belong." Sophie looked down at Noah. "I think part of me already knows." It had been 2 weeks since the accident, and Sophie hadn't left, not really. She went with Liam to the grocery store, the pharmacy, even the town diner where she insisted on helping with breakfast prep in exchange for fresh eggs. But every evening, she returned with them to the little house on the edge of the hills, and every morning she woke with Noah curled into her side, as if he'd known her his whole life. Liam watched this slow, blooming connection with a strange ache in his chest. He'd stopped correcting Noah when the boy called her Mama. Sophie never encouraged it, but she didn't reject it either. There was something in the way she looked at Noah, protective, tender, that made Liam's chest tighten. Then there was her laugh. It had happened one afternoon when Noah spilled juice on her lap and burst into tears. Sophie scooped him up, spinning him in the air, as she laughed a sound so full of life and light that Liam had to look away. Hannah had laughed like that, not all the time but enough for the memory to echo now. Uninvited. At night, Liam sat on the porch while Sophie cleaned up inside. He'd light a cigarette he rarely smoked, stare at the stars he could barely see through the trees, and tell himself this was temporary, just a woman in need, a child who'd filled a hole too big to speak of. But it wasn't that simple anymore. The way Sophie smiled when Noah brought her wildflowers, the way she made soup when Liam coughed once too many times, the way she tucked a blanket around him when he dozed off on the couch after work. These weren't the gestures of a guest, they were the quiet rituals of someone who'd always belonged. One evening at the grocery store, it happened. Sophie was near the produce section when a man approached her, tall, well-dressed European. Liam hung back instinctively. They spoke briefly, Sophie startled, then guarded. But what struck Liam was the language. French. Fluid, precise. She turned away quickly, brushing past the man with a cool nod, and returning to Liam with apples in hand, and a faint smile on her lips. He said nothing on the drive home, but something shifted. Later that night, he couldn't sleep. Noah was out cold in Sophie's lap, both of them curled up on the couch. Sophie's hand rested lightly on Noah's back, her chin tilted toward her chest. Her breath was steady, calm. Liam walked past them into his bedroom. He opened the drawer of his nightstand and pulled out the old photo album he hadn't touched in a year. He flipped to the picture he always stopped at Hannah in the kitchen, holding Noah when he was just a baby. Her auburn hair was pulled back. She wore a pale blue sundress. Her smile was wide and real. He looked back into the living room. Sophie shifted in her sleep, her head now resting on Noah's shoulder. Liam brought the photo to the doorway and held it up, his hands trembling. The resemblance was uncanny. It wasn't just the face, it was the way she tilted her head when she listened, the way her nose crinkled when she smiled. He lowered the photo. Slowly, the air felt heavier. Liam walked back to the kitchen table and sat down, the photo resting before him. "Who are you really, Sophie, and why does my heart ache when you're near?" The evening was quiet, the kind of stillness that settled only after a long day and an early snowfall. Inside the house, the fire crackled softly, casting a warm glow across the living room. Noah had finally fallen asleep, tucked under a blanket, on the couch with his stuffed bear clutched in one small hand. Liam sat at the kitchen table, a framed photo in his hand. Sophie entered quietly, drying her hands on a towel. She paused when she saw him, sensing the weight in the air. "Sophie," Liam said, his voice low, "there's something I need to show you." He turned the photo toward her. In the picture, a smiling auburn-haired woman held a baby in her arms. Her eyes sparkled. Her face was serene. Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She stared at the image, her hand trembling as she reached for it. "Hannah," Liam said, "that was my wife. She passed away 2 years ago." Sophie's knees gave slightly, and she sank into the chair across from him. "She has my face," Sophie whispered, "but not just that. The shape of her hands, the way she smiles." Liam's brow furrowed. "I know, you look exactly like her. That's part of why I've been so conflicted." Sophie looked up, eyes wide. Her name was Hannah. Liam nodded. Sophie, single quotes, his fingers tightened around the frame. "My name is Sophie Laurent," she said, softly. "I grew up in Paris. I was adopted by a French couple when I was 6, but I wasn't born there." Liam leaned in, confused. "I always remembered flashes," she continued. "A playground, a house with yellow curtains, a girl who looked just like me. My sister, we were twins. I got lost one afternoon in a crowded market. I never saw her again." She swallowed hard, tears filling her eyes. "They told me there were no records, that maybe I imagined her, but I never forgot. That's why I came back. I needed to know if she was real. I needed to find her." Liam stared at her, his heart thudding in his chest. "She was real," he said, his voice cracking, "and she was everything." Sophie's tears fell freely now. "And now she's gone," she whispered. "And her voice broke. "I fell in love with her husband." Liam looked away, his jaw tight, his hands clenched. Sophie pressed a hand to her mouth. "I didn't know. I swear to you, Liam, I would never have let this happen if I'd known." Liam stood slowly, crossing to the window. Snowflakes drifted outside, silent and white. "I believe you," he said finally, "but I don't know what to do with any of this." Sophie stood as well, gathering her coat. "I should go," she said, barely above a whisper. "This is too much." Liam turned, but she was already at the door. She paused, her voice trembling. "For a moment, I thought I found a family. I thought maybe I belonged somewhere. And then she was gone." The door clicking softly behind her. Liam stood in the silence, holding the photo, his world spinning. He hadn't just lost Hannah once, he'd just lost her again. Sophie slipped out just before dawn, the morning light barely brushing the edges of the curtains in the small house they'd come to call home. The night was silent except for her quiet footsteps as she gathered a few belongings, an old pair of shoes, a sweater, a picture of Noah smiling in her arms. She paused at the coffee table, heart pounding, and laid down a note in neat but shaking handwriting. "Liam, I love you. And I love Noah. I came searching for family and I found both of you, but I can't stay. I can't take the place of Hannah. She was your wife, his mother, the foundation you built. I thought I could help you heal, but now I fear I will break everything instead. Please forgive me, and forgive yourself always." Sophie folded the note, placed it on the table, took one last look at the sleeping shapes of father and son, and quietly left through the back door. Early morning mist swallowed her silhouette as she walked away. Inside, Noah stirred, shifting his stuffed bear in his arms. He woke fully and blinked in confusion. "Daddy, Mama." Liam snapped awake in bed, heart thundering, and rushed into the living room. Noah sat on the couch, tears welling in his eyes. Beside him lay the note folded like a fragile promise, broken. Liam swept Noah into his arms. "It's okay," he whispered, though his own voice cracked. She had to go, but she loves you. She cares about you so much." Noah began to cry, the boy's tears soaking into Liam's shirt. "I want Mama," he sobbed. Liam rocked him, feeling an ache deeper than any he'd known. Sophie had become their world, and now she was gone. He looked at the note, the promise of love and the pain of departure etched in every carefully chosen word. In the emptiness that followed, Liam realized he had one more task he couldn't ignore. With trembling hands, he dialed Dr. Green. "This is Liam Carter. I need Noah's test results." A pause, then a voice. "His results are in. He has a rare genetic condition. There's one full match for a bone marrow transplant." Liam held his breath. "Who?" "Someone named Sophie Carter. She agreed to be tested, but we're missing her contact details." The name rattled through him like thunder. Sophie Carter there. She'd signed the papers with his last name. He hung up and moved with purpose. He scooped Noah into his arms again and carried him to the truck in the dim garage. Rain had begun to fall. He buckled Noah into his car seat with shaking fingers and sat behind the wheel, his heart pounding. He drove through the silent streets, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. He searched everywhere she might be. Calf, the community center, the overlook, where they'd shared hot chocolate and conversation, but everywhere he found only emptiness. Finally, he reached the highway and slowed under a lone street lamp on the old bridge overlooking the river. His phone buzzed. He glanced down. The screen displayed one text: "Meet me at the old bridge." "I understand." He didn't reply. He parked a few yards away, engine idling, and stepped out into the cold night air. The rain felt like sympathy on his skin as he walked toward the dim light. Under the ramp, he saw her, Sophie Carter, her auburn hair damp around her shoulders, eyes red, rimmed. Just she stood by the railing, her frame small against the broad sky. "Liam," she whispered, and her voice cracked. He closed the distance, holding Noah gently in his arms. Without a word, he handed Noah to her. The boy wrapped his arms around Sophie's neck, eyes wide and searching. "He needs me," Sophie said, voice trembling. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she looked up at Liam. "I thought leaving would protect you and him from my guilt, from my mistakes, but he needs me." Her voice broke, and my heart broke every mile without him. Liam's eyes glistened in the lamplight. "He does," he said, "and so do I." Sophie looked at Noah, who pressed closer into her, seeking comfort. She closed her eyes and leaned into Liam. "I love him, and I still love you." Liam's knees threatened to buckle with the depth of feeling rising in him. He looked at her and said softly, "You're not replacing Hannah. You're giving him life. You're part of our family now." She reached out, brushing her hand across his cheek. Rain mixed with tears. "I'm sorry, Liam. I thought running away was right." Liam pulled her and Noah into his arms. The three of them huddled under the street lamp, the rain falling around them like a benediction, soft and full of promise. He whispered into her hair, "Welcome home, Sophie." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with relief and love. "I'm not leaving again, and we're not letting you," he said, voice certain. They stood together in the Rayner family, reformed under a forgiving sky, bound by love, sacrifice, and the promise of a second chance. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting golden light across the modest kitchen. The smell of fresh-baked cinnamon rolls filled the air, mingling with the aroma of scrambled eggs and warm toast. Sophie stood by the stove, humming softly, her auburn hair twisted into a loose bun. On the kitchen table sat Noah's lunchbox packed neatly with carrot sticks, apple slices, and his favorite peanut butter sandwich cut into a perfect heart. Noah bounded into the room with the boundless energy only a 4-year-old could possess, his backpack slightly crooked on his shoulders. "Mama, are we late?" he asked, grabbing a roll from the counter. Sophie smiled and knelt to fix the zipper on his coat. "Not if we leave now, sweetheart. Go get your shoes." Noah darted away, leaving behind a trail of giggles. Liam leaned against the doorway, still in his flannel shirt and jeans, a mug of coffee warming his hands. He watched the scene unfold with a quiet, contented awe. For a moment, he was completely still, soaking it in. The light, the smell, the sound of life returning to the house. "I could get used to mornings like this," he said. Sophie turned to him, her face glowing in the light. "You already have." He walked over and pressed a kiss to her forehead. "You know, she used to make cinnamon rolls just like these." Sophie nodded. "No, but they never smelled this good," he added with a grin. Sophie laughed, soft and genuine, then lowered her eyes, touched by the mention of her sister. "She would have loved you," David said gently, "and she would be proud." Sophie's gaze met his. "Sometimes I wonder if she sent me here." "Maybe she did," he whispered. "Maybe love doesn't die. Maybe it waits for the right time, the right place, the right people." The front door slammed, followed by Noah's shout, "Shoes are on, let's go." Sophie chuckled and reached for her keys. Liam stopped her, held her hand for just a moment longer. "Sophie," he said, "I need you to hear this. Love isn't about replacing someone, it's about carrying them with us, while building something new. You're not her shadow." He took a deep breath, emotion tightening his voice. "You're the new light in my life." Sophie's eyes welled with tears, but they didn't fall. She squeezed his hand, then smiled. "Come on," she said, brushing a kiss against his cheek. "Our little guy's got a future to chase." As they stepped out into the morning sun, hand in hand, Noah, skipping ahead, the words lingered in the air like a quiet prayer. Love doesn't replace the past, it redeems it.